Hello and welcome to today's webinar from Robertson's Facilities Services. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've done quite a few of these now, and I can tell from the amount of registrations that this one is, pardon the pun, really hot topic for you. We've got loads of people on the stream already. We've had over 100 people register for this webinar, which is like smashes all of the previous ones. So as I say, I know it's a really important topic. And it's really good that we have our resident expert, Alex Bladen, who's going to kind of unravel the mysteries, I guess, of some of the regulation and what's happening in the industry right now. I think if you're anything like me, this is one of those topics that even at home, like this is the one that I'm a little bit OCD sometimes. Like, oh, did I check? Did I leave stuff on? Like fire is one of those big things in our consciousness. And I'm guessing for you, if you're a facilities manager or something like that, this is the one that keeps you up at night. So hopefully we're going to be able to answer some of your questions. So without further ado, let's bring Alex on. Let's see if we can make the tech work. Hey, there we go. Hi, Alex.
You okay? You all right, Kevin?
Thanks for joining us. I guess the big question, like, what are the key fire regulations that commercial property owners, commercial property managers, should I say, need to comply with?
So the main one is the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005. This came in due to quite obviously a few tragedies that happened in the early 80s, 70s, 80s, and then there was one in Scotland. It was the Rose Park care home fire, and from that they decided that there was too much strain on the fire service to be able to do the job really of making sure every building and everywhere was compliant and fire safe. So they brought this in to create a responsible person, which is normally the highest senior member in a company or like landlords, and basically put the onus on them to make sure that their buildings or premises are compliant with fire safety.
Right, so that's interesting. So the responsible person, the responsible person isn't necessarily the expert. They're the person, like the buck stops with them, and so they need to create the culture and employ the right people or bring the right experts in to make sure that they're compliant. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's basically because they have control over that building or premises or company. It's down to them to make sure that everyone in there who's either using their premises are safe. So that's obviously that's where in this there's different articles. So the first 7 articles are basically just highlighting what is within the regs form order, what it's there for. Starts off with number 8 in part 2, which states any responsible person must ensure that any employees are safe from fire, and also anyone who would be using the building, so that's visitors or customers or clients, anything like that. And then it moves down into number 9, which is they must have a compliant and competent fire assessment completed. It used to be that if you had less than 5 employees, you didn't have to have a written one. You could just sort of go around and go, right, that's a hazard, that's an issue, we need this. But now they've changed that where no matter how many people you have, if you've got a place of business, you have to have a fire risk assessment done. Yeah. Then it moves into number 10 and 16, which are basically ways of how, from the fire assessment, of how you can have your building safe. So that might be preventive measures, fire safety arrangements, eliminations or reductions of certain materials that might, or other factors that could cause fire, getting rid of them, firefighting equipment or detection, making sure emergency escape routes and exits are clear, and procedures for any additional issues. Or again, you might also, if you've got a high risk area that using, say, flammable liquids for a process, you might have additional measures for that area. Then it comes to 17, which is maintenance. So make sure any of the above that you've got has been maintained. Making sure that when it's needed, it actually works. There's no point having something in. not just think, oh yeah, it's fine, put it out of your mind, and then next minute you need it,
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
working.
And those minutes, I always with things like that, it's like those minutes. Like not all minutes are created equal. Like those minutes, those seconds are really important in life, aren't they? Like that one thing, that one decision that somebody made. Oh, there's no fire extinguisher. Oh, that door's locked when it shouldn't be. Like that can be. It's like one of those sliding doors moments that changes potentially a lot of people's lives. And it was just one careless thought, one careless action months before, that because it hasn't been checked.
Well, a lot of like fire strategies and risk-based solutions as well are based off like two things called there's A set and R set. So there's A set, which is the available time for evacuation, and then there's R set, which is the required time. So you might until the premises or area becomes untenable. So basically, when people would be overcome by the fire. So you would have by measuring them two things out, you'd have the required time is always going to be less than the available time because you want to give that extra amount of time to make sure people can get out. So that's where all these sort of systems and having extinguishers, having fire alarm stuff like that come in that gives that amount of time to be able to let people out. So if you've based it on these products working and then one of them's failed because it's not been maintained or for whatever reason, your time dramatically goes less from what it was previously. So you're sort of going against the own stuff that you brought in to make sure the building's fire
Right,
safe.
right. So, just before we get on to my next question, I just should say to everyone, uh, we like to make these interactive. So, if you've got any questions, there is a chat feature. So, we'd love to hear any questions, and I'll try and bring those in at the appropriate moment. At the very least, we'll, pardon the pun, have a bit of a quick fire round of questions at the end. So, at the very least, we'll try and handle those at the end, but I'll see if I can kind of weave those in at an appropriate point. So, it's great to hear from you. So, if you do have any questions, do feel free to answer them. And also, I should say, we're going to be talking for about half an hour, going through like the main questions that we were going to look at. But again, it'd be great to look at your questions, and we'll do a little sort of quick fire Q&A at the end. Okay, so I guess you've talked a little bit about fire risk assessment there, Alex. I don't know whether you've really answered perhaps it's obvious, but I think it'd be good to hear it from you. Like, well, what is a fire risk assessment, and who's responsible for carrying that out?
So for carrying it out, again, it comes to the responsible person. They can obviously push that, delegate that to someone within their business to make sure someone comes in and gets it done. But really, it should be someone with qualifications, really, of either they've done a fire risk assessment course or they've done some sort of something to do with fire safety. But because they are starting to bring now where there is going to be a register for certified fire risk assessors, whereas before anyone who's sort of had the previous sort of done a course or something like that would be able to do it, but now it's you're going to have to be able to be like registered. But it is on the onus of the responsible person, so they should make sure that someone is coming in to do a fire risk assessment. Basically, what fire risk assessment is a scientific method is used. So the scientific method has 5 points. So it has identifying the risk, then it has identifying the people who are at risk, then any remediation or action plan of any of the findings of the first two of how to make sure that these risks are reduced or eliminated. Then you have documentation, make sure everything is put out and documented. That's like maintenance, any sort of evacuation plans, anything like that. And then you have 5, which is review. So this will mean that it should be reviewed, and there's quite a few different reasons why you'd have it reviewed. So if there's very few issues, you've sorted them out, you would just have it reviewed annually. So you just come and get someone in, have a look, make sure everything's all right, no changes have happened. But then if you have had some sort of like, you've redesign, you've put in an extra room somewhere, you've changed what it's using, what you've used the building for, completely change. You'd have to have a whole new risk assessment done.
Yeah, because
Um,
obviously, yeah, the hazards
yeah,
within the building have materially changed. So, just a couple of there's a little bit of
yeah. But you also have one every 3 years anyway. So every 3 years, it's recommended that you should have a full new one done,
right, because
not just
you
like a
get sort of
review.
creep.
Just
Yeah, things creep, don't they? Things tend to change, and no one's really noticed because it happens over 3 years, right? So, just a couple of people
yeah,
debating this point, and I was interested in that as well because so Terry's asking. Let's post this up actually. So Terry's asking kind of what I asked as well, but I think it bears honing in on this because there's probably people on the call that like, well, is that me or like, is that someone else? So Terry's asking, does a responsible person always have to be the top person in charge? Because I guess like, and Hannah's chiming in here, like, well, is it the person responsible for that building, like a location manager? Because I guess it might depend how complex your company structure is. Like, is that the CEO of a massive corporation, or is it like the local area manager or the building manager? Like, how does that work?
yeah. So the responsible person still is the most senior member of staff, but there is also the relevant person. So the relevant person is the person who has the most daily control or has control of that building. So the CEO is not really going to. They probably might not go to every building all the time. They don't know everything about every building. The relevant person of that building will be probably either the most senior person who works there or someone who's been specifically instructed to be the person for fire safety in that premises. So it'll be both of you, but it still relies
So,
on
so
a
if I
responsible
can just
person.
clarify that, then the buck stops.
They're going
If
down
I
to
could
that.
just clarify that for everybody, then, so the buck stops with this person at the very top, but then they can kind of
Yeah,
responsibly, with training and all of that, so delegate that effectively to a relevant person who is more like the person on the ground, and they're going to be the people that organise this. Like the risk assessment. It might not
yeah,
be them that does the risk assessment, but like it's their responsibility. But it's only delegated from this person, so it's up to them really to set the culture
yeah,
and make sure everybody's trained and all that sort of stuff. Is that right?
yeah. So when it comes to obviously there is an issue, comes to prosecution, obviously it probably would still be the person at the top would then go, well, I brought this in, we've given them the training, we've done
Yeah.
this, and it's still not happened. But it still does kind of go down to them because they should obviously be checking to making sure that people who are employed to do their job for fire safety, it is being done.
Thank you. That's a really helpful clarification because again, it's like, well, I guess that's the sort of thing that keeps
Yeah,
people
it
on
does.
on this call up at night. So, Lisa's asked a great question. There's been a couple of great questions. Lisa and Lindsay, if it's okay, I think we're going to cover some of those later on. So, we'll get to those a little bit later if that's okay. So I'll come back to those. Um, so. I guess we're talking a bit more broadly here, and then we can dive in to specifics. But kind of broadly, what fire safety measures must commercial properties have in place?
Yeah, so with the regulatory reform order, it doesn't highlight really what you need. It doesn't say you will need a fire. Wait, no, it does actually say you need a fire alarm detection system, but it won't say like what type or how many you need or anything like that. It just says sort of states it. It then comes down to what we as industry use is the British standards. They're best practice, but they're not necessarily law, so you don't have to follow them. But they are what everyone follows because they are the best practices. You have to show that you are putting in what the regulatory form order wants you to put in generally. Um, so you get your fire alarm detection, automatic detection, extinguishers. You may need some sort of smoke vent system mainly in stairwells, to make sure that people who are in higher floors can get out. You may need like going back to firearm detection, you may have detection but without the call points. But then depending on the risk assessment, that will then determine what you will need. So when it comes to obviously the fire precaution measures, so there's two types. Well, there's automatic fire protection, and there's passive fire protection. So automatic fire protection is like your detection, your extinguishers, anything that once there is a fire, it activates, or you need to do something like press a button and starts working.
Yeah.
Puts out the fire or remove smoke. You then have the passive fire, which is like your fire doors or your compartmentation. So that's your fire resistant construction.
So starting to reduce, you're trying
That's
to
that once
reduce the risk by
you place,
design rather than sort of starting to stick on measures. It's
yeah,
like it just is inherently kind of safer.
yeah. They sort of break off into them too of how they all sort of do similar things. Obviously, your fire doors and your fire construction will stop anything passing through to one side to the other, and then you've got your smoke vents. They will then suck out the smoke that's building up in that, say, escape corridor or anything like that. So yeah, it all does depend on the type of building you've got and what your risk assessment says you should have in certain areas or in the building. So like when it comes to fire extinguishers, you might have, because each fire extinguisher does sort of puts out a different type of fire. So you wouldn't just put water or a foam fire extinguisher into everywhere and then just expect that to do the job of putting out every fire. If you're, say, you've got a kitchen with a lot of cooking oils or big areas like that, you'd have like a wet chemical in the kitchen, because that is designed for that. Same as what you normally see is a foam or water next to a CO2, because obviously quite a lot of places now have a lot of electronics or electrical devices.
Sure.
So you've got the water and the foam to put out sort of fires with like combustible materials like paper and cardboard and maybe furniture and stuff like that and tables. And then you've got the CO2 to then put out the electrical devices. So you'd always see a CO2 in like a server room. Maybe a plant room as well, just to make sure that you've got the designated special fire extinguisher for that specific hazard that might be in that area.
So what I'm hearing really, and I guess there's no surprise there, but it really underlines that there's no one size fits all. Obviously, it's potentially
Yeah,
highly complex. If you've got a mixed use building and maybe an older building, there could be some stuff that you could do from that passive, the passive protection, or you may need to start putting in some of these active. Well, you always certainly will have to put some active measures on top, but you may be limited in what you can do in passive measures because the building is the building. But with newer buildings or ones that you're about to design or changes, then you can start to perhaps go back to add some of those passive ones. But I guess the point is you've got to have somebody who knows what they're doing to make that risk assessment, and especially to carry it out and to implement the measures and review them, right?
yeah, because what happens frequently when I go and do risk assessments is people think we've got a fire alarm put in, we've got compartmentation has been installed, for certain areas, so like cables passing through, or we've got this extinguisher, and they think, well, we've got it, it should be fine. It's sort of out of mind, out of sight once it's been put in. But then sometimes it's reviewing it to see that, make sure that it is actually correct, because I think quite a lot of times people think the people who are installing it know always what they're doing, and sometimes that's not always the case. I'm not saying for everyone, because obviously it does happen where people put in the right stuff, which is what we want. But especially when it comes to compartmentation, there's a lot of, we've come back since obviously Grenfell happened and compartmentation was quite a big issue. When we've gone into places, we've seen, oh yeah, we've got fibre out there, we've got mastic around cable stuff and things like that. But when you actually look at it, it's not been installed to the manufacturer's details, and it's not been installed to British standard details. So it's not always put in correctly. So sometimes it's to review this stuff. That's why it says with the risk assessments that it should be reviewed, because even though you might go, oh yeah, we've got something to put it in, it's fine. But then if you get someone in who's trained and know what they're looking for, they'll be able to determine.
I guess it's always good to have somebody else check your working, right? Because even if you think you've done it right, you still need, it's often like how, I mean, even just writing an email, right? Sometimes, or it's an important email, you can't see your own mistakes because you're too close to it, right? It's just good to have somebody else. And Chris has asked a great question. Chris, I'm going to come back to that one again. because there's some really good questions coming on here, but I'm going to come back to those because Alex sent me, and I think this is a good point to do. Alex sent me some great images, pictures of things that he's come across, which will be, I think, quite relevant given what you said about these risk assessments. And going through them, it felt like I was on one of those online courses of like spot the hazard. So we can play spot the hazard here a little bit. I think you'll all probably get this first one. So, Alex, talk us through some of these.
Yeah, so obviously the first one, it's an exit door, but they've put no exit sign on it. There might be a reason why it's not being used as an exit, but they've still got all the other signs up there. So they've got
Isn't
fire
it like,
exit, push the bar.
yeah,
Yeah. Do we use it? Do you not use it? But then that would become another thing when it comes to the ravine fire assessment. If there's a reason why that door can't be used for an exit, you might have to maybe possibly reduce the numbers of people in there. You might have to have an exit somewhere else, quite close to that, but somewhere else as well. Or, but that could be confusing. If a fire alarm goes off and there is a fire, people seeing smoke, and they try and run to that door, they might panic and just go to that door instead of going to another door.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then number two is even
worse. Next to, obviously, there must be some sort of issue with that one where possibly the lock on the door at the floor level wasn't keeping it shut properly. So they've obviously put that in to make sure people aren't just walking in or walking out. But again, fire, people start panicking, trying to open that. Probably wouldn't be able to open it. And also that bit of cardboard, that stuff in it, it's just a combustible sort of material in the escape route, really shouldn't be there either.
Yeah, absolutely. And then and it looks like there's sort of spillages as well from something even on the floor in front of the door, which is not great.
It's probably from that.
Yeah.
But then if you look on the last one, obviously they put the blind down to obviously reduce the sun, but you've blocked the sign. Obviously, you can see at the top of the outline. That's the fire exit sign.
Yes. Yeah.
So someone might be coming past and they might see that and they've not seen any green sign or anything. They might think, oh, that's not an exit, and then carry on going. That's delaying their evacuation.
Or even if they do, they've now got to kind of fight through this kind of blind thing, when it's supposed to be easy to get out, right? So let's have a look at round two. Talk us through this one. I didn't spot this actually. When we beforehand, I didn't see this at all. So what are we looking at here?
So in this one, if you can just see on the larger picture that there is a fire extinguisher down there. Obviously, it's hidden behind all that other material, like obstructions. You can't even really see the sign to know which one it is. Is it CO2? Is it a water? So obviously, if you need the extinguisher there and you're looking around and you're not that familiar with that area, or even if you are familiar, you might start panicking and you're trying to get it out. You're getting stuck. You can't pull it out. That's obviously reducing the amount of time you would be able to safely then use the fire extinguisher.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, on to this one. I love this one. This one felt quite Harry Potter, or reminded me of Labyrinth, where she's trying to get into the labyrinth and at least to get through the wall, and you've got to do something clever to figure out how to get through that exit, right?
Yeah, I can confirm there wasn't a secret button you press or anything through, but yeah, obviously that sign, it's not really showing you where you're meant to be going. It's meant to be going to the left, but that it's obviously again, if there's smoke, visibility down, people might end up at that wall thinking there is a door there, and then overcome by the fire.
Yeah, they're like no diagonal.
And then the other one, obviously, unless you're directly underneath that one, you're not really going to know what he's trying to say.
Yeah, totally. And then I love this one. This was kind of said to me like, well, if you're a carnivore, go straight ahead. If you're vegan, go left. Is that, it's a bit confusing, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Just giving, obviously, contradictory sort of information to whoever's, to the occupants of the building. Do they go towards McDonald's, or do they, as you say, go to the vegan bar?
Yeah. And then talk through these. There's some really obvious ones here, and not so obvious, I thought, as well.
Yeah, so obviously you've got an occupant's obviously decided, I don't want my bike just on the floor, I'm going to tie it to this fire extinguisher. make sure that it's all safe, make sure, if anyone's trying to use the extinguisher, they can not really use the extinguisher. There's also an extinguisher missing as well from the other side. CO2 is missing, so I don't know if that's on the back wheel or not. You then got, so the middle one, probably everyone's thinking, oh, it looks okay. The issue with this one is there is a printer just sort of in the escape route, and really you shouldn't have anything that's going to cause any unnecessary fire load or ignition source within an escape route.
Yeah, that was an interesting point. So I thought, oh, he must have sent me this because it's blocking the route, but which as you've just said is true, but it's also a potential source of fire itself in an escape route because it's an electrical object, which I hadn't realised. So.
Yeah. Basically, you're adding additional risks to an area that shouldn't have additional risk, really. And then the last one is a detector putting. So this is what I was on about. I was saying, I thought, oh yeah, well, we've got detection, but as you can see, it's very close to the frame of a door. In the British standards, they should have at least 500 mil free space around them to make sure that they're getting smoke, being able to detect smoke correctly, really, make sure they've got enough space so when the smoke plumes at the top, it's going to hit that detector and give it enough time to be the correct amount of time to be able to detect it.
Great. Yeah, that's really helpful. I'll do one more, and then we'll go back to the questions and maybe jump to some of there's some really great questions coming through. I want to make sure we address those. There's some fun ones here. The first, talk to this first one because this is to the untrained eye. I didn't think was particularly obvious. So what's wrong here?
So again, as I was saying, people putting in fire compartmentation and putting in what type of fire safety stuff. But they've put fire bat round a ducting, fire stopping it. Yeah, that's great. But if you look at what it's gone into, it's just a false ceiling. So, and it's also open air. So if there is a fire either side, the fire's just going to burn through.
Right.
That. So it's not really doing anything. It's just sort of someone's thought, oh, there's a wall there. It's been damaged by the vent going through. I'll put some fire bat around it. But there's nothing in there. But also as well, if that isn't fire rated ducting, it should have a fire damper in there. And if it's not got a fire damper in there, then it's just going to burn away from the release the ducting, and then it's just going to go through the ducts anyway. So it's basically someone's come in and said you need fire stop in there when you don't need fire stop.
Right.
They've sort of pulled a fast one from it.
I think even I can spot number 2 and 3. I think, but just talk us through those quickly.
Well, obviously you've got the fire actor there, and there's no one's getting through that. Are they really? You're getting one person maybe down the side, and then that's going to cause a bottleneck. Delay evacuation again. People are going to trip over, cause an injury. And then the last one is evacuation chair stored away, nice and safe, locked away.
Yeah.
No one can use it unless you have the keys. The key's probably going to be on the other side of the building, or with someone who's already outside, and then no one's going to be able to get out. The person who needs that chair isn't going to be able to use the chair to help them evacuate.
And that's one of the, like I said, that's one of those key seconds. Like somebody's put that on there, and just at the point you need it, those 2 seconds or those 10 seconds, that will make all the difference. It's a massive, makes a massive difference. So let me just come back to I'll look at some of these questions. So we're talking about risk assessments. So I'll dig into a couple of those before we move on. There's quite a specific one here. What fire risk assessment would need to be done for a small block of 2 or 3 flats that have a small communal area? And I guess it'd be great to answer this specific question, but also the point behind it. It's a relatively small building. That there might be a lot of people on here who are landlords for relatively small buildings like this. What specifically needs to be done?
Yeah, so the risk assessment would still be similar. It'd still be the scientific based one. It'd still be we use the PAS 79. That's the government / industry issued one that everyone sort of uses. It's got all the areas that most buildings have, like the issues and stuff that come up frequently. So it'd still be that one. It would just obviously some of the things wouldn't be relevant for it, but you would still want to look at the fire resistance between the compartmentation of between each flat, also between the flat and the communal areas. What's if detection? So when it comes to detection, you'd have a part one, which is the commercial side. So that would be automatic detection in the communal areas linked to a fire panel, and then you would have in the actual apartments, you may have then maybe one detector from that same part one on linked onto it, and then you'd have your domestic detection as well involved. So if there's an issue, you don't want like false alarms coming through. They could turn it on and off if need be. And then if there is a fire, the other detector then would link to the fire alarm system. So that's what sort of stuff you'd have for that. So the risk assessment would be the same. They would just look at them sort of communal areas, make sure that they're free.
So it's not that
The areas are
it's
free.
not
Make
that
sure that
there's some sort of lower level of risk assessment. It'll just be that some of
no,
the sections or that some of the detail might not be relevant to that building, and you just like your tax return, you just go, no, that's not relevant, that's not relevant, but you still have to do the same thing.
that would just be NA. Yeah, so that's basically what happened. It would be probably a level 3. A level 4 risk assessment is where you start digging into the like invasive. So you start taking samples from the walls, samples from the ceiling. You'd look more into the build, like in depth into the build to make sure obviously the quantifications there is fine. Because obviously, but that would maybe come off of part unless you think you've got issues of that. You would go for the part 3, the level 3. Right. But that then might, if you think you're fine, someone might come in and go, well, we're not sure about that wall, we're not sure about this area. We think you'd have a level 4. Maybe not even a level 4, or you may have a compartmentation survey based off that, where someone would come in, they'd look above false ceilings, they'd look deep into like void areas, stuff like that. So that's where the levels sort of come from. But they would all really be level 3. It would just be sections, would just be NA or
Sure.
No need for any of that to be in the risk assessment.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. Now, there's a couple of questions here that relate to this. So rather than ask a question, I'm going to ask you the question I was going to ask you, and then we'll see if that answers everybody's question. So how does the fire safety, you've kind of talked about it a little bit there, how does the fire safety legislation apply to shared or multiple occupancy commercial buildings? I guess we just looked at residential, and like one of the questions here is like who's I think, where was it? What was the question? I've lost it. Anyway, I guess that's the point of comes down to like who's responsible. Like, is that confusing, or how does it apply to multiple occupancy commercial buildings?
Yeah, so in the regulatory reform order, it says in Article 22, cooperation and coordination between responsible people or persons. And basically, what this means is if there's more, so if there is a landlord, say landlord owns the building, but there's multiple floors, different companies in different offices, each one of them would have to cooperate and coordinate with each other. So to make sure everyone in that building is fire safe, fire safety is like on point, make sure everyone's safe, can get out and everything like that. So that would mean it does depend on the lease, because sometimes the leases might say that the landlord's responsible for only the communal areas, and then possibly offices that aren't occupied at the moment in time. So they might have a risk assessment done just for the communal areas, making sure their areas are fine, and then they get the tenants to do a risk assessment for their own areas. Or it could be that the landlord just does everywhere, and then they have to make sure that the tenants keep to what it says in their fire assessment. Don't start changing loads of stuff, making sure doors aren't kept open and stuff like that. But then once that's been decided on who's responsible for what, it then comes down to making sure that their fire risk assessment, the landlord's fire assessment, is a copy is given to each tenant, and then vice versa. So the tenants are then given their assessments to the landlord, making sure that if there's any issues that are contradictory to someone else's risk assessment, that it's all fine. There's no issues there. And if there is issues, obviously they would have to bring in some sort of bring them in, go through it and say, well, this is affecting this person, this other company. You need to change this
Sure.
to make sure that we're
I'm,
all
I'm
nice
guessing
and
so.
together.
Therefore, like so many things in life, you want to be on good terms, right? It's like you don't really want to sort of revert,
Yeah,
go have to look at all the legal stuff. Like obviously you do for something like this, but it's better to start with like a good relationship. Like we're all trying to do the same thing here, and I guess as well.
yeah,
Firstly, that's interesting. So it's really key to go check your lease. Like who is if you're in a multiple occupancy, like
yeah,
check like legally, who is responsible for what, and then I'm guessing that situations like serviced offices or where the use is quite similar, I'm guessing it would probably be more the landlord. But then for other situations, although you still got to check that for other situations where you might have very different kinds of, but maybe more sort of commercial, sort of out of town areas, where you might have quite different types of business in one building. Like you've got a car repair guy here and a consultant here. But more sort of white collar sort of. You've got two very very different businesses. I would imagine that their own risk
yeah,
assessments, they might have to do their own risk assessments more because they're so different. Is that typical or?
yeah. Yeah, so they obviously they would have different because of the different risks. They'll have different risk assessments, and also they'd have to show how it would hinder the other side. So, if, say, like you're saying with a garage, they might have fuel pumps outside or something else that's more flammable that might risk their front door going out, their main exit going out might be there, and there's the gas pumps right there. So it's a bit you don't obviously well we can't have that going out to there. 'Cause that could be the hazard that's then set off something
Yeah.
else.
And because of the
Yeah,
nature of what they
that's the
have,
type of
those
thing.
hazards could be quite quick and very flammable. So um,
Yeah,
I'm just going to just go for our last one here because this is, I guess, a biggie for keeping the people on this call up at night. What are the penalties for failing to comply with these fire safety regulations?
yeah. So any fire service or HSE inspectors, that's the can come in and they can inspect your building basically, and if they've determined that there is issues, they can hit you with like an alteration notice, which basically means you just need to make like small changes or that there is a change of use in the building, but there's not been a risk assessment. So if you've gone, so say you've decided you're completely changing your business and then you completely revamp to a whole different type of business, but you're still using the same building, but you've not had a risk assessment done based on them changes, they can be like, well, you need to get a risk assessment done to make sure that the changes are done. Then there's the enforcement notice. So that's where they found issues that are still very serious, but they're not serious enough to like shut you down or shut parts of the building off. But you get given a time period to basically you've got till like I say a year or so or 6 months or a month or whatever it is to make sure that your building is safe. These requirements of what's ever stated in the enforcement notice are done, and with that you can be fined. You can end up going to court, go to jail for if you continue not to do it. Um,
Wow.
and then you've got the prohibition notice, so that's even more serious. Where basically they decide that your building is that unsafe that they're going to completely
They're
shut you
going to be
down. You have
out.
to have all your occupants out, so that's the same. Yeah, so that's obviously more damaging for residential because people live there. That's where they live. People might have to be moved out. And then that comes down to come down to responsible person and the company to well, you've got to find them alternative accommodation now. So that's costs of that. But it could also be they just shut a part of the building down. So say possibly like a nightclub or something. They've got two floors, but they've decided for whatever reason something's happened. The rear exit from the second floor or the exits from the second floor aren't compliant because whatever they've done some sort of refurbishment or something like that, they might come in and go right. Well, until you've made the upstairs safe, you are not allowed to use that operate using the upstairs. So that obviously the money that they've put into revamp upstairs is going to go now because obviously you've can't use that space. You're not getting anywhere from that. So that's where it comes to huge fines, prosecution, shut down the business completely. Um, yeah, that's the issues that you can face from because it's criminal. It's a criminal offence as well to basically not do any of the
Yeah, I can
changes that
imagine. Well,
they've that
it's pretty. Again, I mean, it's the big one, isn't it? You don't want to kind of mess with because with this because it's so it can affect so many people so quickly. So and also there's reputational risk as well. Obviously, we're more concerned about the fire, the health and safety risk, but there is reputational risk as well. Because it's fires are big and loud and very visible all over the news, and they tend to make the news for that reason. So. Um,
Yeah, exactly. That happened with Woolworths when before obviously they went bankrupt, but they had a couple of fire incidences going through, especially the big one in Manchester. And then eventually, after the one they had a fire after that, they decided that the American-owned business decided because of the reputation they just parted way with the
Oh,
company. They
really?
sold it
Interesting.
off.
Yeah, yeah. So
But
even if
that's
nobody's hurt, still they're big and they could have been
yeah.
hurt, and yeah, so it's they're very there's obviously very real reputational risk with these. Um, Brilliant. Look, thanks, Alex. We've gone through the main questions I wanted to cover, but we've had lots of good questions. So rather than go to my kind of quick fire questions, I'm going to try and get some of those answered. I'm also aware that we've kind of gone. We've talked a lot. We've covered so much. I find it really interesting. Actually, we're already to 12:43. So just to say before we go on to those questions that if today has raised anything that you would like to talk further about, the team here at Robinsons would love to talk to you. So do feel free to get in touch with us. Details are at the bottom here, and we'll also watch out for our the next webinar that will be coming up probably in 2 or 3 months' time. It'd be great to see you on that one. If you need to jump, feel free to jump, but we're going to carry on answering some of these questions. So if that's interesting or want to ask any more questions, we're going to be here for another 5 or 10 minutes if that's okay with you. If you need to carry on or get back to work, make that call, finish the sandwich, then it's been great to see you and thanks for joining us. So, Alex, I'm just going to pin you with another couple of questions. We've had a couple of questions about fire extinguishers. So let me deal with this one first. Many people are aware of the standard annual fire extinguisher testing, but not so much 5-year extended testing. Is this a 5-year requirement based on all or just specific types of extinguishers? I'm testing your deep knowledge here.
It does depend on obviously the manufacturer details of what it says its life of is, but that normally that the 5 year is mainly for the water and the foam, I believe. I think the CO2s can last up to 10 years, so it is based on the actual fire extinguisher.
Right, it's
It's
not
not
a
just
blanket
based.
thing. Pardon the pun. It depends on the extinguisher. So on that note, I'm going to say I'm going to put this one. I've got to have this after that. Where would you need to use a fire blanket?
Um, Kitchens are the biggest area for fire blankets. Again, it's the same as if you're not going to have if it's just so if you've got more of a commercial kitchen, it's a restaurant side place or a fast food area, something like you would have a wet chemical as well as the fire blankets, because if it's just a small little pan, you might be able to put that out with a fire blanket. If it's a big what's the word grill, not grill, deep fat fryer type thing, you then would want the wet chemical. Whereas if you've got more of a kitchenette in your offices, you've got a kettle, microwave, maybe a small hob or something like that, something where only a little thing might catch fire. That's where you'd want the fire blanket, and possibly a CO2 as well, for the electrical issues as well. But that's where a fire blanket would come in, more for little
Small
food
fires.
fires, more
I have my
really.
own, I think, amusing story about a fire blanket, which I was debating with. I'm going to share it if it's all right. Quickly, indulge me. So I used to work on an oil refinery. So I used to be a chemical engineer, and we got to do like big fire safety. It wasn't just like extinguishers. Like we got to use the hoses and like how do you turn off a fire oil refinery. So it's quite cool. And we had the fire retardant suits on and stuff. And we had to put out. They were showing like the fire triangle, so you cut off the oxygen. So we had to put out a burning oil drum fire, like so it's pretty hot with a fire blanket, as far as I remember. And I just copied what the fireman did, right? Which was he did that, and be careful here so the fire didn't come up here. and he gripped the sides with his jacket. But of course, he had a heat-resistant jacket, not just a fire-resistant jacket. So I went like that. I managed to get like a burn on a fire safety course, which I was like, yeah, like what's the word? I can't think of the word, but you know what I mean. It's just like, how have I managed to get burnt on a fire safety course, right? So I had to go off and get like a Firazine or something like that, with cream, and oh, it's quite funny. Anyway, so use fire blankets
But
carefully.
there is something coming in as well that so obviously we live in digital age and also more and more electronics. Lithium ion batteries are coming quite a big
Right.
risk of, obviously, especially the ones that aren't necessarily produced correctly or they've got damage or sort of issues. They're bringing out, because basically with the lithium ion batteries is when they burn, it's a chemical reaction. It's a thermal runaway, exothermic reaction. It's a thermal runaway. So the cells in the battery, when one blow like is damaging blows, it then sets the
Right.
next one off, and
Yeah.
then once that's done, it keeps doing that and that. So, and also you can't really use water extinguishers, and you can't use. You could possibly use a CO2. They are sort of bringing out this an extinguisher that does put out lithium ion batteries. But the issue is, you think you've put it out, and then another one sets off, and then you
Right.
might eventually run out of what you got. So they are bringing out these fire blankets free for like e-cars and other areas, where basically where it is, you sort of just put the blanket over the top, and then you just let it do its
Right.
thing
And I
and let
guess
it
that's
burn
starting to
out.
become an issue, right?
And
Because more and more buildings have battery. They might have solar panels, and they might have an on-site battery that's storing some of that as a buffer or whatever. So yeah, I can imagine those that's not just an issue for like cars or something. It's they more and more buildings have those kind of batteries. I'm just going to try and whiz down a couple more questions before we go. I don't think I'm sorry, everyone. I don't think we're going to have to. We can get all of them, but fire. Let's go for this one. A fire safety assessor who visited our site told me that a certain type of extinguisher is now being changed, does not be used anymore in a few months' time. Is this the case? If so, why?
yeah, if it's what I think it is, it's basically the foam extinguishers are being phased out due to environmental
Oh, okay.
issues. There's nothing to do with the fact of it. It's just once they don't get used, they then get sprayed out or however they dispose of them. And also, it's just to remove that environmental issue. So there is a new foam coming out that is meant to be more environmental,
It's a bit like they
and also
phased that
it's
Halon
pretty
back
much
in the
just,
day, right? Same things. It will bring us down.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful.
So yeah, we've been,
And then, do you have to have? Let's do this one. Do you have to have a fire compartment plan in place?
you should, everywhere should. It just makes it so much easier when you're determining what areas you need to be part of the compartmentation. Because a lot of areas we go to where there hasn't been a fire strategy done for the building, or if there has, they don't have a copy of it. So if you're coming, you want to get a fire door replaced because you've put all the fire. A lot of areas where we go into places, they want all the same doors put in. So they put all the doors in, and then no one knows if that is meant to be a fire door or not, or if it's just a door that looks like a fire door to make everywhere else look the same. Whereas if you add them designs or plan, you would know, right, okay, yeah, this area needs to be a fire compartment, and we know this fire door of whatever resistance needs to be put into there. So it just makes everything easier, making sure you're not getting the wrong stuff in, making sure obviously that it is correct as well, right? Yeah, this is a protected area, protected corridor. This is someone's apartment or anything like. Then that, yeah, then you can look as well if there's any cables going through into the apartments or through anywhere else or anything going through at the top or even in the walls or anything like that. Right, okay, well that's a firewall. It's got fire resistant materials on it. We need to fill that. Make sure it's the same resistance as either it says in the plan, 30-minute or 6-minute. It just makes life easier when it comes to doing any repairs or remedial works that you have to do.
Right. So I was just debating which to go to next, but I think this is relevant. So Tom asked, sorry, Sarah, I'm going to try and get to your question, but if I could just get a very quick answer on this, which is very much related. So if I've had it, you mentioned this fire strategy survey. does that replace the need to have a fire risk assessment? From what I heard, it's more like that's the pre-work you do, and then it makes it much easier to do the fire risk assessment. Is that they are separate things?
Yeah, so the fire strategy you develop for either the building, and then the fire assessments make sure that it sticks to that fire strategy. So if you've got a policy, a certain type of evacuation policy, is that still the policy that it says in your fire strategy? Have you refurbished a certain area? Is that refurbishment on been added to this fire strategy, or anything like that? So basically, anything the fire strategy says, when you do your risk assessment, you go back to that. Right, the fire strategy says this, this, and this. Risk assessment. Well, you've got an issue here because that's not compliant.
So short answer, because we're going to get a
Same.
quick fire. Short answer, no, doesn't
Yeah,
replace the need. So
oh,
very
yeah,
different
no, you
things. Yeah.
still need it. Also, yeah, in the reform one, it still says you need to have that risk assessment.
Sarah asks, what letter as an agent do we need to send to the responsible person of a block of flats? And then she followed up regarding an FRA. Does that make sense?
As in,
your guess is as good as mine.
oh, yeah. So basically, what they need to produce for their tenants of what fire risk, of what requirements are under the for the tenants, what they need to follow. I think that is saying. So yeah, it would.
So I guess this is an agent who maybe rents out the flat on behalf of somebody who owns the building. I'm guessing that person would be the responsible person. And so what is what do they need to send them? I mean, it sounds like they need to send them more than they don't just want to send them stuff. They want to have a conversation and like just make sure that everything's in place.
Yeah, so that might be who's possibly in who is going to be in the building. So possibly if they've got any disabilities or any impairments or anything like that, like do they need to have an evacuation plan put in, like a peeps?
I guess bottom line, Sarah, we're not entirely sure what you mean. So do feel free to get in touch. I think maybe we just got the wrong end of the stick. So just going to deal with one last question. Chris, because I think you asked that earlier on. Have you ever experienced any variability between fire risk assessment? I mean, I'd be very surprised if you say that, that it must be some variability. And I just, what's your experience of that been?
Well, between fire assessments, did you say? Yeah, so we've been to some places where it's been 2 pages long, or you can clearly see that they've not looked around the whole building properly, or looked into the documentation. They've just sort of, I've heard of things where they've been there an hour or two, and it's like a building that's took all day to actually assess. So most risk assessments should be quite a big document. So ours are only 60 pages to maybe 80 pages, depending on the amount of failings that we find or issues. Or sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes it's just literally putting in all the stuff that they do have, not just the stuff you don't have. So to make sure, right, yeah, you've got the fire extinguishers within a certain area, you've got the fire alarm detection system, you've got the compartmentation, evacuation stuff, all the training that your staff members have.
So they might have done everything right, but you still want to document it. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it's all documented. Yeah. So even if, like I said, even if you're your place is very safe, you got all the stuff in place, it still has to be documented, so it should still be a big document.
And I'm guessing, look, at the end of the day, I go back to my very early comment, right? Like, did I leave the oven on, kind of thing. This is the sort of thing that, like, if I'm going to be, we joked about this bit when we were preparing for this, if I'm going to be standing up in court and do I want to be holding the 60-page document or do I want to be holding the 2-page document? Like, yeah, I think that would be that's kind of where I'm at as a layperson. Like, I want to be able to show that, like, I did everything I possibly could. Even if we got it wrong or something happened, like, we did try, like, we did do everything we were supposed to do. So, yeah. Look, Alex, thank you so much. Thank you for all like, this is clearly a hot topic because, like, we still got plenty of people still on, and we've well overrun. So I just wanted to try and get as many of those questions. Do contact us if you've got any more questions. Yeah, go for it, Alex.
So again, with the fire assessment, a lot of because of in regulation in the regulatory form order, it says 17 Article 17 is about maintenance, so it's making sure all your stuff's maintained, serviced, firearms, all that. A lot of that of the fire assessment, sometimes half of that is looking through all that sort of stuff, making sure everything in your documentation, even when it comes to like boiler checks, gas safety checks, the fixed wire testing, pat tests, and stuff like that. That's all in it. So sometimes it can, if depending on the documentation you've got, which you should really have anyway, that could take up a big bulk of what you're doing. Not just then, right now, I've got to go walk around. Sometimes it's to making sure that you've got all the documentation that you need to
Right.
know.
It just pulls everything together, make sure I've done all this, everything's up to date, tick, 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 tick. And it's not all over the place. It's in one place. I can check everything.
Yeah.
Yes, which makes sense, doesn't it? And again, just by doing that reduces the risk because you've got all of that information. It's being checked regularly, and so on. So, look, Alex, thank you so much. Thank you for. I'm going to let you go, Alex, but thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching. And again, do join us for our next webinar we've got coming up. If you missed the previous webinars, you can go to this link below, robinsonsfs.com/video, and you'll see the replay of this will be up there fairly shortly, probably the next day or two, and you can see all the previous webinars that we've done as well. So thank you for watching, and enjoy the rest of your lunch. Cheers.